Hello everybody. You may wonder why I'm talking in a strange squeaky voice. Well, when I was born it took a long time, and I've been running at half speed ever since, so I thought I would just speed it up a bit. Consequently, my voice is a bit higher than normal. I'm going to read this to you, and I hope you enjoy it. This story concerns these 6 little guys who live in a cottage in the woods, and they spend all their time wandering around in the woods, but they like looking after their house too, and they do a lot of gardening and generally having some fun. But every now and again, they need to take a day off. And this story is all about what happened when they went on a picnic. That evening, they gathered round the fire, as they normally did, telling stories late into the night, and they decided they were going to go on a great adventure. Not just a picnic. They wanted to have some fun, some real fun. So they went to bed quite early that night, actually, because they wanted to have a good night's rest, so that they could get up early the next day. The next day came, and they set off through the forest with their picnics. And after a little while, they noticed there were some strange blue butterflies flying around, hovering all around them. And they'd never seen these before, so they were quite interested in this, and they wanted to investigate further. Come along, one of them said, let's follow it and see where it takes us. We wanted to have some fun, so let's have it. Come along. And so they followed along. They didn't really know where they were going either, you know. Anyway, they followed along, and eventually they noticed that these butterflies, they all flew into this cave. And this was really peculiar. They hadn't seen this cave before, didn't know anything about it, and decided they were going to investigate further. So they went inside, and got their lanterns out, and quietly tiptoed along. All of a sudden, they heard some footsteps, pitter-patter, pitter-pattering along, coming their way. So they hid round a corner and waited to see who was coming their way. And to their surprise, they saw these little Chinamen carrying a box. And so they followed them. They followed them and saw that they were going upstairs. Where on earth could they be going? Anyway, they did decide they were going to follow. But they got to the top of the stairs, and the door was locked, and behind them, the 2 Chinamen came along and said, "Wait! Where are you going? You should not be in here." Well, they explained they didn't mean any harm by it, and they just wanted to see where the blue butterflies were going. They want to know more about these butterflies, and they meant no harm. So the guys said, well, all right then, we'll show you. We'll take you to the blue butterflies. So they took them through the door and showed them the entrance gate and showed them the butterflies in the garden, fluttering around, and said, go and see our leader, and he will explain to you the butterflies. And so they went out into the garden, and they found the leader. He'd been sitting in that box in the cave carried by the Chinaman, and he just got out and he was talking to his butterflies. And he explained that these butterflies, they come from China, and they bring messages from the emperor. He said, now, would you like to have a cup of tea? I have some very nice cake too. Would you like to join me for a cup of tea, and I will tell you more? So they said, yes, fine, whatever. So they all went and sat down at the dining table, and they had tea. And the Chinaman explained, these butterflies have come all the way from China, and they brought me a very important message from the emperor. He says that I must return very quickly to China, because there is a big problem. The Chinese are being attacked by Egyptians. They are camped outside China, and they're waiting to attack us, and you must come home and solve this problem. In the meantime, would you like another cup of tea? So they said, well, yes, please.
So they all drank some more tea. After a good night's sleep, they set out early next morning through the gates. I do have a map here, you know. Let's just have a look at the map and see where they've gone and where they're going. Yes.
Okay, now they set out through the gates and entered the forest. And before very long, they got rather stuck because this box they were carrying, it was too big to go through the undergrowth. So he said to them, I'm going to leave my box here. They're going to, my little guys are going to take the box back home and we'll just go on foot. I'll do some walking for a change. So they set off through the undergrowth, and by this time it was night time, and they were getting a bit lost, but they could see the dim outline of an ancient building.
And so they decided they would make their way toward it.
Ah, look, it's very ancient. Let's go inside and see if we can find somewhere to rest for the night. So they went inside. Was that a good idea? I don't know, but actually, no, it wasn't a good idea, because inside they found that there were some Egyptians performing an ancient ceremony, and they watched for a while, but after a while they started to think, maybe we should not be here. I think this place is cursed. I don't like the look of this. I think we should go, quick. So they quickly left and made their way through the woods, but all the time they had the feeling they were being followed by those Egyptians. Anyway, they went as quick as they could, and after a little while they noticed some lights, and as they approached they saw it was a lovely tavern in the woods, and so they decided they would go inside and stay there for the night. Ah, welcome, said the landlord, and how can I help you?
Oh, well, we're looking for somewhere to stay for the night. And also, if you've got a nice hot meal and some drinks, that would be nice.
Of course. Please come inside. And so they sat down by the fire, and lovely hot food was brought to them, and a big tray of drinks. And so they ate, and they were absolutely full up. Because there were so many of them, it was decided they would just sleep on the floor by the fire. So they cleared the dining table away, and then they lay down with their little rugs and pillows, and they went fast asleep by the fire. And they had a really good night's sleep as well. Next morning, bright and early, they waited outside for the farmer with his cart, who was going to take them part of the way towards China. And so off they went, and it was a mountainous road which weaved around the mountainsides, and they could look down on the forests. But eventually they came to a fork in the road, and the farmer said, you must go along that road there, because I'm going this way and you're going that way, if you want to go to China. But be careful, it's dangerous up there, you know. And so they waved goodbye, and off they went. But as they got further and further along the path, it seemed to get more and more dangerous, and all of a sudden, all these rocks started falling down on them from a great height. And but just round the corner, they did see there was a little sort of cave going into the rocks. So I said, quick, come on, let's get into that cave. And so they hurried along, got in the cave. But at the other side, they were confronted by those Egyptians, who were not pleased at all, and said, we have put a curse on you, and we're going to get you and take you prisoner, and we're going to take you to Egypt as prisoners, where you'll be slaves. Oh dear, they didn't like that, and they were very worried, but one of them suddenly had an idea. I'm not going to go to Egypt as a slave. Why would I want to do that? I'm going to try and escape. Look, behind us. Quick, everyone. Let's jump and slide down this slope. And so that's what they did. The Egyptians did try to follow, but they're very awkward people, the Egyptians, because they can only walk sideways, you know. And they fell all over the place, trying to go sideways down the slope. And the little guys and the Chinamen were getting away. They landed at the bottom of the slope, plunk, and quickly shook themselves off, and said, come on, let's be quick, let's go, and see if we can get away. So they hurried, and after a while, they came to a cave, another cave this is, not the same cave as before, this is a new cave, and they decided, let's go inside here, perhaps we can escape this way. And so they did. And so they went inside, and it was one of the strangest caves they'd ever been in. Stalactites and stalagmites, I think they call them. Anyway, after playing around and horsing about for a bit, they said, come on, let's go. I think I can hear the sound of running water in that direction, and that's a good sign. It means the water's going somewhere, and perhaps we can go there too. So they went along and came to an underground stream in the cave, but all of a sudden they heard a clunking noise. They held their lanterns up, and down the tunnel was floating the Chinaman's box. Good heavens, quick! Get in, and get my box out immediately, said the Chinaman. And so they did. And inside the box were the two little Chinamen. The big Chinaman was not very pleased about this. He said, you've got my box all wet, and what are you doing in my box, and what happened? Anyway, the little Chinamen were very upset, and explained, the box, we got stuck in the woods, and it fell down a slope and fell in a river, and all we could do was get inside. And then the river flowed into a mountain, and this is what happened. We came down this cave in this river, and you pulled us out. Oh well, okay then. Well, maybe it's a good thing. We are all going to get in the box, and some of us will get on top, because it's only a small box, and we'll go on down this river and see where it takes us. And so they all clambered aboard, and off it went down a dark tunnel, but they had their lanterns to light the way. But actually, you know, the river started to flow faster and faster, and eventually it was a mad long head rush, and they were thrown out. The river flowed out at the top of the mountain, and they were tumbling all over the place, and then they landed in a lake at the bottom. Are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. Are we all okay? Yes, we're all okay. They swam around for a bit, and then got together and got their box, and they got out and crept up a path, because they could see some flickering flames of a fire. And they thought they might investigate, but they decided they would be pretty careful about it, just in case it was those Egyptians again. And lo and behold, it was the Egyptians warming themselves beside a fire. They wondered what they were going to do about this, and decided to make a plan. So they went back down the stairs a bit, and the Chinaman said, look, these Egyptians are obviously very frightened of dead people. So why don't we disguise me as one of those old mummies that you find in old Egyptian tombs, and I'll pretend to be a ghost coming after them, and perhaps that will frighten them away. And so they got their bandages out and wound them round him from head to toe, so that he looked like an old Egyptian mummy. And he went back up the stairs, and he jumped out and went, boo-hoo, woo-hoo, ooh, I'm coming to get you. And he ran after the Egyptians, but the Egyptians ran away up the mountainside. They were still going sideways, because that's how Egyptians walk, you know. And he chased them, and they ran right away. So that was lucky, wasn't it? Anyway, he went back, and they took the bandages off, and they had a lovely time warming themselves by the fire, and then they had a good night's sleep as well. They stayed by the fire, because it was nice and warm, and there was no danger from the Egyptians anymore, because they'd run away. The next morning, bright and early, they set out through the forest to see if they could find their way to China. And they followed the path for quite a long way. Let's have a look at the map. Yes, you can see they followed for quite a long way, sort of twisty-turny through the mountains and then down this path through the woods. But as you can see, they came to a fork in the path, and they just did not know which way to go. But all of a sudden, look, one of them cried, it's your butterflies. They've come to show us the way. And so they thought, well, let's just follow them. I'm sure they can guide us to China. And so they followed. And then eventually, they went quite a long way, but eventually they did come to the gates of China. It's a gate in the Great Wall of China, you know. And the guards on top saw the butterflies and saw them coming, and they opened the doors and let them in. And then they closed the doors behind them. And then they said, come along, we'll escort you to the Emperor's palace. He wants to speak with you. And so off they went, through the mountains, and eventually they came to the Emperor's palace.
Welcome and greetings. I am the Emperor.
And they all knelt down in front of him in great respect and said, "Hello." The Chinaman said, "I've brought my friends. They are going to help me in this task." The Emperor said,
"Well, let's have a good dinner, and we'll have a talk about this and decide what we're going to do."
Well, they sat down and they ate a most marvellous banquet. And the Emperor explained,
"These Egyptians have come, they've sent their army, and they are camped outside the Great Wall of China. They have formed a camp, and I think they mean to attack us. And I want you to solve this problem and work out a way we can defeat them. We only have a very small army, and we might not be able to win very easily, so you're going to have to work out some clever plan."
So the Chinaman thought, And after the banquet, he went outside on the terrace. And the other little guys, they all went to bed because they were full of food, and they were quite tired because they'd been a long way. Anyway, the Chinaman, he went on the terrace and he gazed out for a long time, looking across the landscape and wondering about how they could possibly defeat the Egyptian army. And after a while, he started to have an idea. He'd been looking at those volcanoes over there, and he gradually started to think up a good plan. The next morning, he had called the guards and asked them to bring one of his hot air balloons, which he had invented himself. A number of them were kept in storage for possible future use, and now he asked for one of them to be brought. So they brought it, and he fixed it on, and he was about to set off, but the little guys had got up and they came running along, saying, "Do not leave us behind. We wish to come with you. We would like to help." And so he called for 6 more balloons to be brought out of storage. And so these were duly brought, and they all fixed them on and set off up into the clouds. They flew up into the clouds. And the Chinaman said, "Come on, I have a plan. We're not just messing around, you know. We're going to do something about this Egyptian army. I've thought of a plan. Come on, we'll go this way." And so they set off towards the volcanoes. They thought, why are we going this way? And the Chinaman said, "Come on, we're going down, down, down inside this volcano." And so they descended into the volcano. With great trepidation, they descended lower and lower until they were right down inside the volcano. And at the bottom, there was a sleepy monster. He was the volcano monster from ancient Chinese myth. He woke up and looked at them and said,
"What do you want? Why are you disturbing my sleep? Leave me alone."
They said, "Well, we want you to wake up the volcano, and we need to make it erupt, because we have a plan to defeat the Egyptians." And he said,
"Well,
"That's not my problem. You can do as you please. The boiler room is that way. Help yourself. Off you go. I'm going back to sleep."
And so he did. He went back to sleep and snored very loudly indeed. They set off down a corridor and came to the boiler room. "Come along," said the Chinaman. "Get the door open of the boiler, and the coal is there. Shovel it on the fire and make it really hot. We're going to make this thing really work." So they shoveled on shovelful after shovelful of coal, fresh new coal, and the fire started to blaze up, and they could hear things boiling up, boiling lava, getting really hot, you know. And then Chinaman said, "Oh, come on, look, there's the controls. You get up there. We want earth tremor. That's okay, but we want quake, we want earthquake, and we want erupt." And so they worked the controls. And after a while he said, "I think that's enough. I think we ought to get out of here. It's beginning to get hot. It's really hot in here. Very hot indeed. Very hot." And so they made their way back, got into their balloons, and because of the heat, the balloons absolutely flew up into the air, out of the spout of the volcano, but there was quite a big wind raging outside, and they found the balloons, they couldn't control them. They wouldn't go where they wanted them to go, and they just headed off in the wrong direction, not where they wanted to go. And it was the Egyptian camp. They were in the Egyptian camp coming down, and the Egyptians were tugging at their feet, pulling them down to the ground, and they got hold of them and took them prisoner. Oh dear, we're done for now. What are we going to do? And so they were locked up in a little room with 2 guards, but in the distance they could hear the volcanoes began to erupt. They were throwing out rocks and lava into the air. Quite frightening, you know. And then all of a sudden the door opened, and in came what they thought was an Egyptian. But actually no, it was their uncle, Uncle Tom. It's maybe Captain Tom, when he was younger. I think it was Captain Tom, you know. And he took off his disguise, because he'd disguised himself as an Egyptian, as you can see. And he took off his disguise, and they recognised him at once. And they explained to the Chinaman, "This is our Uncle Tom, Captain Tom." He said, "Come on, you lot, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to put my disguise back on, and I will lead you to safety." And so he did. He led them to the gates of the camp, still with his disguise on. And he opened the doors, and they all ran out of the gates. But the other Egyptians in the courtyard, they didn't really notice them escaping, because they were so confused by the eruption and the smoke and the lava, and because they can only walk sideways, they kept falling over. They weren't able to run away to safety. They kept falling over sideways on the ground because the earth was shaking so much. Anyway, they got to a mountainside, and Tom took off his disguise, and he threw it on the ground. And he said,
"I hate those Egyptian clothes. They're so uncomfortable, you know, and I shan't be needing this anymore, so I'm throwing it down there on the ground."
And they laughed, and off they went up the mountain as quick as they could to make sure they didn't get covered in lava. And they watched from the top of the mountain as the lava flowed down from the volcanoes and completely engulfed the Egyptian camp. And so that really was the end of the Egyptian army, covered in lava, and they remain there to this day. Back at the palace, the emperor was terribly pleased, and he said,
"I'm going to give you all a medal, and a special honour it is for me to give you these medals, because we're all so grateful to you for saving China from the Egyptians."
And that's how Captain Tom became Captain Sir Tom. The next day, after a good night's sleep, the emperor said,
"Bring my mechanical bird. I would like him to take you home safely and quickly."
And so they all gathered round, and they climbed up into the bird, and there were fond farewells all around, and the emperor waved goodbye, and the Chinaman waved goodbye. He'd decided to stay on for a little while to sort things out and to invent some more things that could be useful in future. And so they waved goodbye, and the bird flapped its giant wings and flew off into the sky. Let's have a look at the map again. And the bird flew as the crow flies, in a direct line back to their cottage in the woods, a long, long way away. Over the mountains and back home they flew. And eventually, when they got there, the bird hovered over their cottage in the forest, and it let down a long ladder. And one by one they climbed down to the cottage garden, where they stood safe and sound in their home. And Uncle Tom came down the ladder with them, and he came in, and they all had a lovely cup of tea. And really, that's the end of the story. We hope you enjoyed it, and please visit again. Perhaps we'll have another story for you one day. Goodbye. Bye-bye.